and it's talks about how like, well, it's funny because this whole idea of like a visual culture isn't a new. It's not new. Like, it's not
Mm.
new, at least to me. Like I read a lot of Jean Baudrillard in his books. Like he has one called the Simulacra Simulation, which is what the Matrix is based off of. But just the idea that like we copy everything that we see,
Mm.
everything like that, and it deals with like the idea of like free will. Like, what is free will when all of your choices are made for you before you were even able to decide that you had an opinion about anything? I mean, down to like the underwear we wear. Um, Talking about how like it's everything's marketed to make us consumers. You know, I've been wrestling with this idea of like, are we really in a capitalist system or are we in a feudal system? You know, like
Mm. Is that brought up in the book, or that's something that came up
no,
for you?
that's it's been something I've been dealing with for a while.
Yeah.
Just kind of like what is this system really? Like we call it capitalism, but is it really? And honestly, like just thinking about the word capitalism is a trigger word for a lot of people on both ends of the spectrum. However, you're referring to it. You know, if you're idolizing capitalism, the left gets all tangled up. If you are criticizing capitalism, the right automatically throws up any sort of defense. So, can we even have a conversation where we deal with the problems that capitalism puts forward if all we are doing is reacting to a trigger?
Mm.
So,
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that right now, everyone on the internet thinks that they're like a political expert because they like have a basic idea of what communism, socialism, and capitalism are. But really, in existing in capitalism is existing within manipulation, you know? So we don't even know what capitalism is. And I actually would love to hear more about the book and like the visual culture, because now that I'm like kind of processing like what it means, you know, we really do mimic and we're very influenced by what we see. I'm interested in that.
well, I just started reading it,
Hmm.
so I'm only in the introduction. So
Hmm.
I'll kind of give you like the before we go any further. I'll kind of introduce the book. It's called The Visual Culture. It's part of the MIT Press book series. Honestly, some of the like, best information I've read comes from the MIT Press. They have a series of these little micro books that talk about specific subjects. Like one of my favorites is called Future, and it was a book that talked about how like the futurist movement was born out of the labor movement, and
Mm.
kind of how
Dope.
right, um, like before people didn't think about the future; they just went in on about their days. But then the labor movement pushed some of those more radical to like think about the way that culture is presented, the way economics is presented, and kind of like where did we inherit these systems from, and then what are we doing with them? It was a counterculture movement, uh, and it's like the birth of Bauhaus and the birth of Cubism and the Dada movement. So you're like talking about like art movements that really started politically and were political movements before they became usurped by the system that then creating another form of icon. It happens. It's happening in the Black Lives Matter movement right now. It happened with Pride, um, where these huge movements for the rights of an individual become usurped by corporations that use them to plaster all over their clothes without ever doing any actual change to help the people who they're supposed to be representing. I see that with Pride a lot. It's one of like the biggest. And I was just talking to a couple of friends of mine. I go into monologue mode where I'll just like mouth off everything that I think is wrong with this society. But yeah, we were just talking about how like um, these corporations they pander to the masses without making any institutional change at all. These same companies that scream about pride will easily discriminate against somebody from the LGBTQIA plus community and not even bat an eye. You know, they will mouth off. slurs, and never really make actionable changes,
Well, that's the thing is like, how can you, I've been working on poverty consciousness lately. And what is really present for me, and not to make like everything mystical, but it's like if we understood symbolism, we would be able to hack this icon hacking that they're doing to our psychology. And the understanding of symbolism isn't going to come from a public school textbook. It's going to come from understanding, you know, so that's one thing. And then the other thing is, how can you have that much money and have those many lives in your hands and still remain within your ethics? Like, because of the society we've lived in up until now, in order to get to the rung in which you can have the authority to say, let's put a rainbow flag on all of these bags of chips that are going to kill people, particularly probably people in food deserts and people of color in neighborhoods that don't have access to the same food that white neighborhoods do. Like, if you have that much authority to be able to do that, then you're probably not a good person anyway. And like this whole changing within the system shit, like during coronavirus, everyone's waking up to the fact that we don't have to work to survive, you know? Like there are all these consciousnesses all over America right now that are like, hey, I might have been doing something that I didn't really have to do. Like that's kind of, I mean, that's revolutionary.
Well, if we go into history, the end of the feudal system really came after the Black Plague. I don't know if I love history. Like I watch it for patterns and cycles that tend to repeat themselves over and over. And that's really what it is. It's the same. I mean, humans haven't evolved since the cave period. Since we emerged out of the caves, we have not evolved.
Which is science. Like society has evolved faster than we have. That's scientific. That's not just a generalization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the humans cannot adapt well to this environment. So it's hard for us our decision making is being usurped constantly from all of these external like mediums, and it's easy for people to claim ignorance rather than doing the physical work that it takes to deconstruct these icons. And it's like willful ignorance. People who are, money is the most important, right? So like you said, like the example that you showed where, these people don't take ethics into consideration. They would rather slap a pride flag on top of a chip bag than to dismantle this system that oppresses trans Black youth, like to be very specific, like they won't ever advocate for the people who are being murdered, all the trans people around the world that are being murdered, because their ultimate goal is to sell a product that they themselves know is not good for people. They themselves know that like what they're pumping into these chips will make people more addicted to them and will cause long-term health effects. But we do live in an iconoclastic movement society. I remember, am I saying that right? Iconoclast. It's like
I wouldn't know. I'm not
the
things
you. The things that you wear like determine who you are, your status in society. It's a consumer base. Before it was like royalty, like your bloodline is important, but now it's like the material things that you have are what make you successful or make you a human. In this society, it's like you've got peasants, the poverty, and then you've got like these elites, and then you've got like the ultra wealthy, the one percenters, that are sitting on top. And those are the culture makers. Those are the guys who make one decision, marketing decision, and it trickles down and it affects everyone. It's how we navigate. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with all of that, but go ahead.
But you said but.
Such a dork.
Well, yeah, that's true. So what that brought up for me is something that I want to talk about so many things. It's been so long since we've chatted. I really want to talk about the book I've been reading. But when you were talking about this 1% of people that's making the decisions, as a conspiracy theorist, it is so hard for me to be able to get that through people's heads, because what they hear is, the garbage fire that was Occupy Wall Street. And I wasn't even that old. Like, I wasn't really old enough to know what was going on at that time, but I do remember it being bonkers. And then also the idea that there's this, boardroom of men in suits that, you know, lock the door and have a sex party, and then they eat a baby and they talk about what prices are going to be. And then I think what people fail to realize, you know, is that the personal responsibility that we have in this situation is much larger than people would like to believe. Like, because we can blame it on them because it is their fault. Like, the people at the top are really doing this to us. But in order for them to do this to us, and this isn't just magic conspiracy shit, we do have to consent. And we show our consent through how we spend our money, what actions we take, where we get our food, how we communicate with people around us, the way we treat people, not just in our community, but people that we wish ill upon, you know. It really is about our consciousness. But then that gets kind of woo-woo, and people kind of tune out, and they're like, oh, there's nothing I can do. So I want to talk about how everybody's phone was lighting up with Social Dilemma. Can you talk about Social Dilemma on Netflix?
Gosh. Are you kidding me? I cried. So go ahead. I'll let you finish the question.
No, I just want to hear what you think about it.
Well, I mean, you know me. Like, we've known each other for a few years now, and I have never shied away from conversations that might just like jab at people. I mean, for a while I was having my monthly, like, this is your friendly reminder, the data rights are human rights, you know. And then people, like, I have legitimately like had people tell me, you're fucking crazy, dude. Like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Half the time you don't make sense. Like, I've had people unfriend me. Like, one of my really good friends just like stopped talking to me. He's like, all you talk about is this nonsense that makes no sense to anyone. And I was like, what do you mean? And then this Social Dilemma came out, and I felt so validated in so many ways. I was like, oh man. Like, and then it's funny because the last conversation we had that we recorded was about this exact topic, about how the system works. And I mean, nobody wanted to listen.
I've been feeling, here's what's been happening is, so that happened with the Epstein documentary for me, because I've been like, hey y'all, I know that you don't appreciate, like, you know, the right or whatever, and like, it's all a psyop, but sex trafficking is real, and like, these things are actually happening, whether or not you want to admit it. And then the Epstein documentary came out. It was watered down. A lot of that stuff wasn't the worst of it. So I do have a little like pain in my heart because of that. But I was still pretty, you know, validated by the fact that it happened. It became more mainstream for people to talk about it. It makes me wonder, like, what Netflix is in the whole hierarchy of media. Like, why are they releasing that? And then, hey, baby, I'm in a meeting.
Wait, is this a kid?
Yeah.
No, invite him in. We'll throw a party. Like, hey.
I am not letting their face on my YouTube channel. Not today. Not anytime soon. Maybe on some kind of different, you know, not YouTube.
You know, not to like sidetrack the conversation, but children give me hope. Like, when I look at a child, I'm like, there's hope here. Like, we can make a difference.
100%.
When I see adults, I'm like, we're fucking lost. Like, we're fucked. I think that's why I like to hang out with kids.
Same. I'm so
and the thing
glad.
Is, like, it's hard because they see me, and it's like, people take, for example, it's like I go to church, and I volunteer as a storyteller. So I get to go and teach kids and read to kids. I love it because I get to assert their like ideologies right in there, you know, and like really like tell them about like the cosmic perspective, you know, and they refer to it as God, and you know, it's like the universe, and if I use that kind of language purposely within that context. But like, when I have a really good relationship with these children, they know me by name, like they see me in the hallway and they're like, hey, Alex. But it's awkward whenever a parent doesn't know me and their kid is just like, oh, you know, over the moon to see me and wants to hug me and like introduce me to them, and I'm just like, this is awkward, you know, like, and the parents are like, who's this grown ass person who's hanging out with my kid?
Not to like, first of all, the programming that we are under, this includes those parents that are weird and scared. And, you know, I was raised by someone who was afraid of that very thing, not only because it's present in our society, but because there is a lot of programming around it that has us afraid of strangers, rejecting community, treating children like shit, giving children far less rights than we would give any other human, treating them like they don't deserve to have the same access to intellectual conversations, cosmic, sexual, religious conversations. And I think that there are a lot of adults, even with children, that fail to learn the language to speak to children at their level so that they can offer them access. It's an issue of accessibility. And
It really is.
those parents are victims of it too, because they don't know how to learn the language and learn the connection so that they can relate to children in that way because of their childhood trauma and all of the programming. Which it's like, here's the important thing to understand about pedophiles. Most of them are millionaires or billionaires. Not that there's not pedophiles on every corner, you know what I mean? Like, they still exist. But it's like this idea that Criminal Minds or a CSI version that we've been kind of told, that's really not exactly how, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of children go missing through ICE. You know what I mean? That's the problem. It's not necessarily the friend at church as much, you know?
And the thing we don't talk about either is the statistics show that most pedophiles who act out on their pedophilic tendencies tend to be people who were abused themselves, which is also another part of like that. Like, I have this saying, it's like trauma that isn't transformed is transmitted. And when you deal with a trauma like that and you don't transform it, you're bound to transmit it to somebody else.
Gospel.
It's like a disease. Preach. All right, so
Netflix.
I don't know where we went with that tangent, but whatever. Netflix, though. I think
Man, the
about
comments
it
are going to
all
light
the
up on this
time.
video.
We talked
First,
about
let's talk about
pedophiles,
pedophilia and
the church, but
yeah, so The Social Dilemma comes out on Netflix, and I'm like, is Netflix on our side or not? Like, and it was watered down too. You know what I
they're
mean?
not on the side. Oh, it's
Tell me
totally
more.
watered down.
Tell me more.
Well, they did talk about the Myanmar like genocide, which I was like, whoa, I'm surprised that they didn't talk about the Philippines, which I was they did a little bit. Like, it was like Maria Resda was there from Rappler.
It was kind of like when you go to a grocery store and they have like an ethnic food section. It was just like, here's what's not in America. Okay, let's go back to America. It's like,
no, it's Dictator's Playbook. I mean, we're watching it unfold right now, which I'm scared. Like, I genuinely had a conversation with my partner about, like, if shit hits the fan and we gotta fucking hunker down, like, what are we doing? Are we gonna be able to defend ourselves? Because, I mean, this whole Proud Boy fiasco that's going on right now, I know that, okay, so, sorry, I'm gonna be all over the place today.
Go for it.
Before I get into the Proud Boys, we got to really discuss the Memetic War that we're in. We're in a real war. Like, we're at war right now. It's a Memetic War. And like, I know that we don't refer to it as a war or a Memetic War now, but in the future, historians will call this the Memetic War, because that's all we're doing. We're ideological warfare using memes, and they're being shot at from every side. You know, the left creates a meme and it catches on, and the right creates a meme and it catches on. And then these new systems are built out of these memes, you know, so like the alt-right, the Proud Boys, or Antifa, or even BLM, like all of these, they're really birthed out of this Memetic war that we're in. It's dividing us and fracturing our society. And like, where does Netflix fall into that gap? I keep thinking as well. Like, are they there as a passive observer that just puts out content and then just watches what happens, or are they actively trying to push an agenda? And I think about that as well with like Disney, like, or Pixar. Like, Pixar puts out movies like what's that one movie, Inside Out.
Mm-hmm.
And Inside Out radically changed the way that I communicate with my kids about emotion. So it's like, because they deal with like anger and disgust and sadness, happiness, you know, and it's like, my children understand they don't have to be happy all the time, you know, but I feel like we as a society tell kids, you got to act this way and always be like giddy and happy. Everything's got to be like positive, rather than letting them like wrestle with those tough emotions like anger. If a child is never taught to know how to process anger, when they grow up, they're going to have a really toxic relationship with that emotion. That emotion of anger is going to manifest in really toxic ways. So if we don't give children, like you said earlier, the tools and the language, because us ourselves didn't receive that training and didn't decide to make a change somewhere down our lives, then we're just going to repeat that pattern. We're going to feed that to the kids, and the kids are not going to know how to deal with their emotions, like anger, sadness, disappointment. One of my favorite ones, shame. Shame is at the root of a lot of our fear, and people don't know how to deal with it. So yeah, fast forward to the Proud Boys, right? So the Proud Boy movement, Pixar and the Proud Boys,
That's what this episode's being called, for sure.
Pixar and the Proud Boys. But yeah, no, the Proud Boys is just another memetic camp that was birthed out of this war that we're in. And it's funny because recently one of my Marine Corps friends shared a video of a guy, like big ripped dude, and like the typical Proud Boy that they're trying to like uber masculine, and saying like, we denounce white supremacy. We are an organization that stands by American ideals. And like, I don't know what else he was saying, but
you might as well just say like nationalism.
Well, nationalism, what is the birth of the Nazi Party? Like, it came out of the war. It was an opportunity to rebuild Germany. Like the Nazi movement was a movement to rebuild Germany, to be a better version, right? To go back to German ideals, national ideologies. And that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing the Proud Boy movement come out of this, like the throes of like breaking our society, our capitalist dominated society down, and them being like the what are they? They are a reflection of it, and they are fighting for it. So like the Proud Boys become this entity that's fighting for the sustaining ideology of our country, which to this point hasn't served everyone.
So I'll start over. So what was happening was the Vietnam War opened up a lot of people's eyes to the fact that they were having to do something against their will, which was go to war for something they didn't really agree with. So in the same way, coronavirus is teaching us that we are, working too hard and that we shouldn't live like this. That taught us about, our ability to consent and what's just in that way. And so now we can't do drafts anymore. And so instead of recruiting an army full of people that are forced to fight for a leader that they don't agree with, instead they're recruiting an army through hypnotism on social media, which is these memes. And in order to get someone to fight for what you believe in as a leader, you have to be insidious, and create all of these insidious manipulations. And I think that if it were framed as like, hey, you're fighting for an ideology that you don't have a complete grasp on, and it's intentional that you don't have a complete grasp on it, and so it develops these little radicalized armies. I mean, our country right now in the United States looks like it's being radicalized. You know what I mean? Like, who's coming to invade us? Because this is the playbook for what we are doing in other countries, is creating some kind of dissent, and then, fanning the flame, and then coming in to play rescue or whatever. So is it just that the elite have declared war on the people, and we're just not even, we don't even have to be a part of these country wars because it's about our minds now? And what role do we play in like turning off the social media? Like, what is it that we can do about that?
Yeah, you bring up a lot of really good points and really like historical like information about like the way that the Vietnam War kind of played itself out. The Vietnam War was one of the first wars that was televised in the way that it was. It is Jean Baudrillard talks about it in his book Simulacra Simulation. He talks about the Vietnam War being a simulated war, the first simulated wars that we had, where it wasn't, not that it wasn't real, like denying the atrocities that happened during the Vietnam War, but that the roles that we played in were preset, kind of like a theater, and we call it a theater. Like in the military, you call it being in theater. It's surprising how language works that way. So it's a play. It's all an illusion. for what, and what purpose, what insidious purposes are behind the reason why we're doing things. It's like, I think that's why you question, what is Netflix's role? Like, do they have an insidious reason? What are they doing when they put out these documentaries like 13th concisely and succinctly put together what happened after Jim Crow, and how we had this, and a lot of the language that we hear now comes directly from that documentary.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the language that I'm seeing now from my friends after watching Social Dilemma is the same thing that I watched when 13th happened. I'm seeing them now use language that they didn't have before. So it's really about education. It's like knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're able to present in mass like that the ideologies and context and language, historical context and language, then people understand history better, and they're not destined to repeat that same mistake. But we're how many people in this country, and it's hard to not be divided. And I think where we see insidious behavior, I see they think that it's the greatest thing, right? Technology, social media, like Facebook thinks that they've created the greatest tool known to man, or to humans, and they use it because they think they honestly do believe that they are making the world better. Mm-hmm. So because they believe these things, they don't critically look at their algorithms and see what's happening. They don't realize that they are segregating people. We are being segregated. And what happens when we segregate people? There's a byproduct. Individual ideologies become more entrenched. The fact that a person who might think that the earth is flat can go online and find millions of other people that think the way that they think, they create this reality around them that validates them. Just like I did. Like when I watched Social Dilemma, I felt validated. When these people hear another human being say, yo, the earth is flat, they're like, I've been saying that, and they have the same reaction that I did, and these machines that are meant to know us better so that they can present us with the things that would improve our lives, turn into these machines that radicalize our ideologies to any kind. It's what that system is built to do. It's built to divide people into these camps, so that they call them demographics. Mm-hmm. And they then use them to manipulate people's decision making. But it's not even purposely. There's not a dude saying, "Oh, I'm ready to manipulate people." They're gonna go and they're gonna shoot. They shoot up a theater, and what's happening is they're not even realizing that it is. They built this system. They said, this algorithm is rigged to say, if this person likes this set of things, or if this person lingers for 2 seconds extra on this image, what is that image seeing? What is it that person is doing? Where are they at? And then they take this information and they parse it, and then they save it, and then they use it to then influence others. Oh, well, if this person kind of looks and similar to this other person, then maybe they'll react to this meme this specific way. And that's kind of how the algorithms work. And that's not a person sitting back there being insidious. That's an ignorant programmer not realizing there's a bug in their system, mm-hmm. or being blind to the bug. And then you've got people like Mark Zuckerberg, who now know that their algorithms are predatory and don't give a fuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So. That's the scary thing. I mean, I've also been tuning in a little to the algorithms of nature, and kind of how in our actual reality as humans, we understand algorithms. We understand that this will kick off a set of decisions that we make with our DNA and with our chemical balance, and plants are doing that, animals are doing that. We do that with our communication even. And so I think that my hope is that people really understand that they are being hypnotized, and understand that they have the ability to be manipulated. And I think that when we look at, evil villains, it's exactly what you're talking about, that there's this one person that's doing it. But I think that what this age has shown us, not just with these new institutions with social media that are uprising right now, but also these old institutions that we are being totally, oppressed by. Most of us are being oppressed by this institution. White cis men make up less of the population than non-white cis men. You know what I mean? Like, these institutions do not serve humanity. And so these are falling and these are rising. And what we're learning is that, the institutions don't necessarily create our reality as much as we do. And so our participation in those institutions is what gives them energy. And that's what's been so amazing about understanding, the spiritual aspect of some of these things. Like, we have a psychology and we have hormones, and even just the little switch that was made for some people when they saw Netflix. I mean, people do this all the time. Oh, I'm going to fast from social media, 3-week fast, I'm going to do the challenge, hashtag no social media. Like, how ironic is that? It doesn't like, I think it's really about like letting it land and letting it be embodied and understanding that, like, and this is what you're talking about with emotions, it's going to bring up fear. It's going to bring up shame. It's going to bring up disappointment. And being deceived isn't fun. It's not hashtag, no social media challenge. It's like intense grief. And I have to protect my family from this. And this is the culture that we're going to be living in until I, take my last breath. How do I cope with that? And we don't have the right coping mechanisms because we have been bred to purchase and buy and work and give away our energy and our labor to other people. And this thing that we say, like, oh, this is how it has to be, like, this is how it's always been. Now that we're watching an institution like social media be born, we know that the reason that those things grow bad fruit is because it's being planted by privileged people. And they're not considering diversity when they create these algorithms. They're not considering livelihood when they're creating these institutions. I am totally happy to watch social media fall away because I do have faith in the fact that this next generation of institutions that are created might have a little more consciousness in them and might have a conscious, maybe, hopefully, fuck.
They might not, though.
They might not.
Absolute power corrupts, absolutely.
Yeah.
And right now, these social media algorithms, these attention merchants have the power. And yeah, go ahead.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you feel about, because I was thinking about centralized power and its role in the internet community and like the classism of like, not everybody has a computer, not everybody has a phone. What do you think the blockchain is going to do for distribution and diversity and wellness? Like, do you have any faith in the blockchain as a solution?
Fuck no.
Thank you.
Not a single fuck no.
Can you tell me why, since you know more about this than I do?
Blockchain, I know very small amount about. I mean, I know about the white pages. I understand cryptographic, like algorithms, because it's just another algorithm. It's just another protocol that, is safe. But honestly, like, the thing is, there is no one solution to anything. I think that, like, when we look at new technologies, we have this utopian view of them, like they're going to just solve all our problems. Will it be an important part of our future? Yes, it will. It will be, blockchain will be an important part of our economic future, but it won't be the save all cataclysm that's going to, radically reshape the way that we see and use technology. Because like you said, there's that great divide. So I honestly, like, I think when we do the utopian, like, oh, this technology is going to be the greatest thing in the world, we end up like putting ourselves inside of a Skinner box, an even tighter Skinner box, where it's like, now I've given it the control over to an entity outside of myself, right? Mm-hmm. And we're easily manipulated by fancy gimmicks and like sleight of hand. It's why magic is so like wow, like you see like David Blaine and like these mentalists, and it's really just a sleight of hand, and it's really exploiting the vulnerabilities of the human mind. And how easily we are deceived by words, by fancy icons, like a flag. It's like, slap a pride flag, everything will be okay. They won't care that we're still oppressive. And
it's like a horror movie. It's so dystopian. Like when you look everywhere, and it's like a commodification of all of these. Like, I love that you pointed out that these movements get commodified too, because I think that that's really hard to talk to the left about. I mean, not that the right is any easier to deal with, but I think that at least you know, there's this kind of, I think that there's much more hope on the left, and there's much more consideration for the empathy, you know, and that makes it more difficult to kind of pierce this little veil of the fact that you can take something that is so good and corrupt it so much that making donations to it creates a world down the line that you contributed to. And that world down the line is full of suffering for the people that you're trying to help, you know?
Yeah.
Because of
Yeah.
these institutions. And when you said the thing about, you know, like Facebook thinks it has the best technology and blockchain is going to be the best, there's an Egyptologist, Kara Cooney, who I think doesn't actually like to be called an Egyptologist, so a historian, who talks about modern exceptionalism. And in the context of Egypt and its comparison to America, and how close these cultures are in, and it's like people don't really want to talk about the fact that we're slaves right now because of our trauma around slavery, which I think is on purpose. But we are slaves right now. I hate to break it to you. When we're giving our energy away to something that we didn't agree to give our energy away to, and it's draining us, we're too tired to hang out with our kids. We're too inundated with advertising to put down our phones for a second because of the hypnotism and the trance that it puts us in. Like, those are not qualities of humanity that serve an individual life. They serve, you know, and that's the thing, is like, what do we call it? Capitalism, profit, the 1%. It really just serves something that, it doesn't matter what it is. It's not you, you know, it's not who you are or what you want. Grow a garden. Like,
Yeah.
Get a gun and grow a garden.
Get a gun, grow a garden, read a book.
Yeah. Oh, I want to show you my book.
Yes. I want to hear about it though. I know that you got like 20 interviews a day.
Well, not anymore now that I'm doing this, but so this is the Xenofeminist Manifesto. It's an intersectional feminism that is based in the ideology of technology. And honestly, it's you. This is you. Reading this book was like having a conversation with you.
I really appreciate that.
And it has art in it. It's really sweet. But I've really been doing a lot of gender work because I have a lot more non-binary friends in my life, and it's really waking me up to, I understood in a way, but I didn't understand the social impact of forcing people to define themselves by a gender. And so I'm very blessed that people have opened my eyes to that. And so I'm reading this manifesto, and it's talking about, you know, the necessity of learning to code, the necessity of learning to abolish gender for yourself, the necessity of looking at technology not as a means to an end, but as an environment that we live in, and like representing justice in that environment is incredibly important. So when people say like, oh, leave politics out of it, everything that goes on the internet right now is contributing to our society in the future. All of this video is data. Everything you post on Facebook is data. Me sexting my long distance boyfriend with my pussy out, that's data. All of that stuff is going into generating more environments. And so gender is not only a symbol of that, but also kind of like a product of that. And it has served so many toxic institutions that it feels like it's real, but it's really not. And it seems to be this thing that gets carried over. Like, we figure out the formula for this institution and then we carry the one, and gender is still here. And it's like, that binary shit is a spell, you know? It's Saturn. It's the witchcraft. It's like it's not necessary for us to live and to evolve. And its role in technology and in technological environments is really present for me right now because of what's going on in the internet. It's like, we cannot leave gender behind when we have these conversations about a better world, because it's not going to be an inclusive world if we're not talking about how gender isn't real and people are born the way that they're born. I love your new puppy.
Oh, he's amazing.
He's so cute.
He is obsessed with me. I love it.
I get it.
He's my guard dog. He kind of like, he protects me. He's a sweetheart. No, I honestly, just gender as a construct. I was really lucky because whenever I knew there was something different here. Like I knew it from when I was young. I was brutalized for it, you know, for being diminutive, for being effeminate, for caring about things, for like within my own family, like my own family structure, not even outside. Talk about bullying. People never talk about the bullying that happens within the house, which is the highest form of bullying. If like people are like, abolish bullying, where do you think bullying comes from? You bully your child bullies others. So it's like this cycle of repetition. So I was subjected to that through my own family. You know, hearing my parents, especially my dad, use like the word like faggot, you know, and saying things that would in a way like diminish my ability to be my truest self. You know, for out of fear. Like obviously, if my dad thinks it's bad, it should be bad. Why am I feeling this? You know, like why am I having these feelings? And then feeling that shame around something as made up as gender, like especially when we see it culturally, when we look at things like cultures from like biblical times, the way that they dressed, their cultural norms and standards were very different. So when you think about like what it is to be a man in the current society, it's manufactured by consumerist ideologies, right? A man should own a house, buy a car, you know, do a job, this kind of job, and he must wear this kind of clothing and this and that, you know, and really we subscribe these icons to what it means to be masculine or to be a man, and anyone that doesn't fit that should is ostracized or is treated differently within society. Let me put you down, Papa. So yeah, it's really sad. I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and we had brought up the fact that like you've got people who are protesting for freedom, right? So it's like, I don't want to wear a mask. Don't tell me what to do. I just want to, you know, go get my hair cut. And they talk about being free, yet have like jobs that dictate when they go to lunch and dictate their dress code and tell them like how long their hair can be. And I'm like, bro, are you really talking to me about freedom when you wake up every morning at 7 a.m. on Monday and you get dressed in your suit and tie and you get into your car that looks like every other car that every other person, you know, and you go to the office where you're using the system, you know, and it's like, you're not asking for freedom. Like, I don't know if you realize, like if people do realize like what they're protesting. And like you said before, the insidiousness behind the ideology that they've subscribed to their reality. Where it's like, I'm fighting for my freedom, when in all actuality, I'm allowing the elderly to die at a mass rate or the poor to die at a mass rate because this plague is hurting people, you know? So it's like their ideologies are being used against them. And I keep using they, them as in like, because it happens across the entire spectrum. I see it on the left with like political correctness and, you know, the language police or like, I'm non-binary, but I am not a pronoun police because I understand the system.
As fuck cops.
Yeah, that's it, right?
Forget. Honestly, exactly. I'm like, but keep going.
No, that's really it. Just like really not. I'm not the type of person who wants to like tell somebody that they have to like radically change the way that they communicate. Because that's the system. Like I can't sit there and like hold it against them when I know it's a system like that's built it. Like I can't go. And
it's it's like a little classist.
Oh,
right? It's like a little shitty to be like, hey, talk the way I want to talk. And I understand that pronouns are super, super important. And
they are.
But I also understand that maybe in a couple generations, the trauma that we have around it will be a little looser, you know? And so my hope is that people have the choice to loosen it for themselves now. Like, I'm so glad that you're mentioning that. And that sounds hard as fuck.
Especially being somebody who's, I'm an ally. Like, and I myself am part of the LGBTQIA community. Like, I'm an ally to the Black community. I am part of the LGBTQIA plus community. And I hate the toxicity behind it, that people get so up in arms that the cancel culture, that's the word I was looking for earlier. Mm-hmm. The cancel culture really is such a toxic environment because it doesn't give people the opportunity to be human. Being human is making mistakes and learning from them, you know? It's like, I wasn't always woke, you know? Like, I was misogynist. Yeah, so I don't know where I was with that, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that the idea that someone's going to learn about this new institutional problem that is massively oppressive and massively insidious and then immediately switch their vocabulary, that's a lot to ask of a person. And I also understand, like, one of my privileges is that I haven't been traumatized by gender. So it's really easy for me to call people out and not have a lot of trauma around it. But it's also really easy for me to come from a place of compassion, you know? And it's easy for me because I'm not in my trauma response to my childhood of being misgendered all the time. I can come to adulthood with a little more compassion for people that are not understanding. And I have more spoons for it and more energy for it. And I'm very blessed by that. And it's kind of fucking exhausting even for me. And it's opening my eyes to how I love that you brought up the products and the way that, you know, because we look at the 50s as kind of this golden age of when it became really popular to, you know, target women that were in the household. And then that's, I mean, not that women in the household was ever not beneficial, but it's like it became really beneficial to keep women in the household at that point, reading those magazines, purchasing those products. And it became really beneficial to have, you know, suburbs where all of this massive space is lawns. What the fuck is a lawn? You know, and like all of these grids, it looks like a prison from above. It does not look like a community. You're not in a community if you're living in a neighborhood. You're more isolated. It's really, it's sad.
The household was the first simulation
Whoa.
of reality. I mean, really, when we went from like agrarian for hunter-gatherer to agrarian, where we then settled inside of an enclosed space, and the family, the nuclear family, is the byproduct of that. Like, because we do see a lot of domestic violence, and the way that we talked about with like children being born into a system. It's like the child is a perfect example. They're born into a system that they're foreign to. These two entities, which are their parents, have this code of ethics, this code of communication, and the child is born into it, and they have to adapt to it, you know? And that's how people say, oh, it's natural. Like, gender is natural. No, it's a construct, because when a child is born, they have no concept of gender. When I see children, small children, before they are indoctrinated into the society that we have now, they don't see gender. It's a child. Like, they see themselves as humans, and, you know, they interact with this world. But then as we program them through the household, through education, we start programming these ways of viewing the world. Hey, anyone that wears pink is a girl. Anyone that wears blue is a boy. Mm-hmm. You know, anyone that has long hair is a girl. Anyone that has short hair is a boy. So we start to build these, and that is just like a small portion of it. Then we say, oh, you're a white cis male, 5'9" or 5'11", medium build. Oh, you must be successful. Like, that must be. Oh, you're a black middle-aged black woman. You're like, oh, you must be aggressive. And it's like all of these labels that we've given to people become like what divides us, and that's where we draw those lines. It's like, who gets paid more, who gets paid less, who gets more access, who gets less access. Mm-hmm. And it's all built from that framework of the binary of like saying, you're a boy, you're a girl. I mean, it happens pre-birth. Oh, who, gender reveal parties, let's burn the entire country. It's like, oh my God.
There's a lot of like biblical style symbolism going on in the world right now. I feel like a new Bible is about to emerge, honestly, because of where we are spiritually and societally. But I do think, like, what was the thing that really caught my ear when you were talking about something about, it's the segregation that they have created in these institutions is now becoming segregation, when it's like total, like we came back around to social justice, because with this social media hypnotism, we are being taught to do it by ourselves. We're learning, I'm a 20-something white girl, like I need free leggings with a phone pocket. Like, I need it. I need to tap that ad because that's what's going to, give me the white girl aesthetic. Like, and I see it with children too. YouTube right now is a garbage fire and it's not just these big studios creating, you know, Disney movies with subliminal messaging. It's these people that have been programmed by society creating their own content about how society is supposed to look. It's these teenagers and these children that are regurgitating and emulating this stuff. It's terrifying. It's so
Influencer
scary.
culture.
Yes, it's the influencers are becoming little infantrymen in this ideological memetic army. It's gross. But I can't take away YouTube, you know what I mean? I can just have more conversations about it.
Okay, so perfect segue. How do we change this system? I know a lot of people listen to me and they're like, it's all doom and gloom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying social media needs to go away. I'll be the first one to say it. Like, it has done a lot. I can, reach out across the world and talk to somebody. That's beautiful. I love it. The problem is the business model that we talked about. The business model is what's driving that. It's the capitalistic business model. So how do we change that? We talk a lot about history, and one of the things that we can do with history is we can learn from it. And our ancestors had the playbook. They wrote it for us, and we can follow some of the same structures that they built to fight against this oppressive society or the oppressive culture. One example that I like to use is the bus boycotts. So
the bus
boycotts.
Bus boycotts.
Got not you. Bus boy, bus boycotts.
Sorry, I'm in quarantine. Freudian slip.
Bus boy. The Montgomery bus boycotts. Everyone knows about them. We read about them when we talk about civil rights movement and Rosa Parks. What we don't talk about is what is it that happened? What was the byproduct of what the actions that they took? And what happened during that time is that this company, say the Montgomery bus system, had this segregation rule. There's blacks sit in the back. That's just it. And what they never realized is their business, their customer base was the black community. That the majority of their, the people who rode the buses were people from the community. So during the bus boycott, they decided, you know what, we're just not going to ride the bus anymore. We opt out of this system as a collective. One person getting off the bus and saying, I'm not riding this bus, does nothing to the system because everybody is still participating in the system that keeps this segregation happening, right? So at that point, nobody mobilized collectively. We probably would have still had segregated buses, that change didn't happen until there was collective action and collective movement around a cause. And the cause was realizing the Montgomery bus company was subsisted on our labor. And when we removed when all black people got off the bus together and their allies, because there were a lot of white allies. I will never not, talk about the white ally because they're there. And when this group of people marched off that bus company started bleeding money daily. And that's how you hit them. You hit them where it hurts. It doesn't hurt. All they do is they'll usurp a movement. They will squash a union. But when we have collective societal movement where, say, all of us today decided to do what we did during the civil rights movement and walk the fuck out of the internet, walk out of Google, walk out of Facebook, cut it all off, right? Collective action. Today, it's say some miracle, lot. Right? It's say millions of people say, fuck you, we're out, and then stop using social media for a period of time. We would be putting the boot to their neck. I think about Bug's Life. Bug's Life was a perfect example of kind of how collective action works. It's the grasshoppers come in. There's only a few of them, but they're bigger and stronger. And then they squash the ants, and the ants are afraid, And then the ants look around and realize, oh, there's a lot of us. Let's collectively fight back, So it's how do we create that kind of system within our own society so that we can break from so we can force these companies to rethink and restructure the way that they do business. Because you can continue to extract my data. you can continue to like have my data, but I own it and you pay me. And you pay me a price to access my ocular data. You pay or you pay for access to my vocal data, my location data. Oh, you're a map company, you want location data? Pay me.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be, I'm not asking for thousands of dollars, but like a micro payment that anytime I use any of these institutions, I'm collecting a check because it's all energy.
And they're profiting off of our data. It's not like we're overhead or anything. They are making money off of our data. And this is what's so funny. Sorry to interrupt. We started this conversation talking about the labor movement. This is a new kind of labor movement.
Oh, it is the digital labor movement.
Yeah.
Any action that I take down to like down to the electrical charge that moves around in the CPU of my computer, it's all a transfer of energy. It's all labor. It's all like if I move my mouse, there is a series of triggers that happen in my computer that move electrical charges around. So it's like even like us thinking, when you think, there is that quantum energy movement that happens between these neurons. There's all this stuff going on inside of our bodies. That's why when we say, like, when we think about the way that when we consume food, the amount of energy that goes to certain areas, like, running, but like thinking, our brain takes up the majority of the energy that we consume. So when we think about the new labor movement, that's built on the foundation of this new technology like social media and ideologies, like how do we free the mind from the machine so that the mind can be paid rather than the machine? Because right now the machine is being paid, and the machine is the algorithm, the machine is the system, and they're the ones profiting. But the labor is really on the people. It's like, or we privatize profit, we socialize loss. So like when a company loses, we are the ones that suffer. But when a company gains, they're the ones that profit, and we don't profit. Or the trickle down profit, where what do we get? We get we get to heart emoji now, people, rather than actually deal with problems. What's Facebook's gonna do? I'm gonna give you the ability to sad face. We're gonna add 4 more emojis to the way that you can react.
Which is just you taking up more of your time to react in a different way. It's like, think about how much time we're wasting on social media that we could be using to create a better life for ourselves. It's not just about the physical, I love that you mentioned like the calories and the synapses, because that is very real. But there's also just like, I'm laying in bed and I can't stop scrolling. It's like, I cannot stop. And it's not just the physical scroll. It's that there's a garden out there dying, or my children that need my attention, or my bed that needs making, or my book that I haven't written. It's all of these things that I could be producing, but instead I'm producing data for for Mark Zuckerberg.
It's labor.
Who's a piece of shit.
He really is.
Okay, closing statements. We're almost out of here. We got 10 more minutes.
Yes, closing statement. Be aware of new technology and why it's cheap. Be aware of new technology and understand why it's cheap. These companies are trying to put out as much tracking as they can. So why is it that Oculus is now $299? Because it has a retina detection machine inside of it, because it's tracking your retina. Because they have these little cameras that are pointing at your eyeballs and they're tracking them. And that data is important. Biometric data from your eyes is more, it's easier to identify than your fingerprint. The iris is more unique to the individual than the fingerprint. So just be aware of why it's cheap. Closing statement. I don't know.
No, that's a good one, because I wasn't even thinking of that. But we should have a whole VR episode, because... All right.
Yes.
Do you have a place we can follow you? Let's get your contact.
You can find me on Facebook, Alex Ramos, Instagram at AlexRamos8485. My company is Input Output. We're a digital media lab. You can find us at inputoutput.space. we make cool stuff and talk about this stuff in our installations. So yeah.
Awesome. I love you.
You too.
Good to see
Talk
you
to soon.
again.
Bye.
Bye.